On January the 1st of 2007, the Alabama Residential Landlord Tenant Act came into effect, and that dramatically changed the landlord-tenant relationship, and it changed what can be put into leases and the rights and duties of landlords and tenants. And it is critical that every landlord comply with that act, because there are penalties for violation of the act, and a landlord could inadvertently, break the law and not comply with the law if they aren't aware of it. So it's very important that you have your lease, if it was made before January 1st of 2007, have it reviewed by an attorney to make sure that it does not have any illegal provisions in it, and that it does comply with the Alabama Residential Landlord Tenant Act. Also, one important change in the act is the notice requirement of default. This is an area where landlords can have an eviction case and they can lose the case because of a technical problem in their notice of default. So it's also very important that you contact an attorney to make sure the notice you give a tenant who has defaulted under a lease is proper. Otherwise, even if the tenant has not paid the rent, if the notice is not proper and you file an eviction lawsuit, that could cause you to lose your case. Now, generally, if a tenant is behind on rent and the landlord gives the tenant a notice of default, the tenant has 7 days to cure the default. That means to pay the rent he or she owes, and they have to pay in full, or they are considered to remain in default, and the landlord can proceed with an unlawful detainer eviction lawsuit. However, if the tenant comes up with all the money, the landlord has to accept it if the tenant tenders full payment within the 7 days from the date of the notice. If the tenant doesn't, the landlord can file an unlawful detainer eviction lawsuit. Then the sheriff will serve that notice on the tenant, and it can be posted on the premises. The tenant then has 7 days to file an answer to that eviction lawsuit. If the tenant does file an answer, it will be set for a hearing in the district court within about 4 or 5 weeks. If the tenant does not file an answer to the eviction lawsuit, then the landlord can file for a default judgment for eviction after 7 days. Then the landlord must wait another 7 days before he can file a motion for writ of possession, and that writ of possession is what puts the tenant out. The sheriff's department will send a deputy with the landlord to the premises to keep the peace, but the landlord is responsible for having the tenant's possessions moved out of the rental home. So that is generally the process of handling evictions under Alabama law. If the landlord needs any assistance with this, we ask them to call our office.